Why is she looking at me like that? The space station was quiet, almost too quiet. Damon sat at the small desk inside his assigned pod, staring at the blinking red message on the screen. Lockdown in effect. All external doors sealed. Duration unknown. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. Great, just great. The station had gone into sudden lockdown due to an unknown radiation leak outside. That meant no one could leave their pods. And Damon, he had just moved in yesterday. This pod wasn't even his alone. He had been assigned a roommate, someone from an alien species called the Zelari. He hadn't met her yet. Until now. The door to the sleeping area slid open with a soft hiss. Damon turned his head and saw her for the first time. She was tall, slender, and glowing faintly. Her skin was smooth and soft blue, like moonlight. Her eyes, large and golden, locked onto his. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She just stared at him. Damon cleared his throat. Hi. No response. She just tilted her head slightly, like a curious animal studying prey. He stood up awkwardly. I'm Damon, human engineer. I guess we're stuck together. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, but deep. I know. There was something strange in her tone. Not fear, not annoyance, but interest. Intense, uncomfortable interest. Damon walked to the corner and checked the small terminal screen. Looks like the lockdown might last a few days. Could be worse. I know, she said again. This time, her voice had a low purr. He turned to look at her. She hadn't moved an inch, but her eyes, those golden eyes, were still locked on him. Like he was the only thing in the universe. He scratched the back of his neck. Do you need something? She took a slow step forward. Just one. Then she stopped. I can smell you, she said. Damon froze. What? Her nostrils flared slightly. You're human. The scent is different. It's warm. He felt his face go red. Okay, that's weird. I'm gonna make some coffee. He turned toward the small food unit, but even with his back to her, he could feel her eyes watching him. It was like her gaze was heavy, too heavy. When he looked over his shoulder, she was still there. Same spot, still staring. He tried to break the silence. What's your name? She replied softly, Kalera. That's nice. Silence again. He sipped his coffee, trying to act normal, but something was wrong. The air in the pod felt warmer than before, almost humid. And Kalera, her skin looked like it was glowing more brightly now. I need to sit, she whispered. She walked over and sat right across from him, too close. Damon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Kalera was still looking at him, but now her breathing was faster, her chest rising and falling. You okay? He asked. Kalera leaned closer. It's starting. What's starting? She closed her eyes, trying to focus. The season. I didn't expect to be locked in during it. I didn't think a human would be affected. Damon blinked. Wait, what season? Kalera opened her eyes. They weren't just golden anymore. They were glowing gold. Burning. Mating season, she whispered. Damon stood up so fast he spilled his coffee. Whoa. What? Kalera remained seated, calm. Don't worry. I won't touch you. I just need to control myself. Damon stepped back, panicking a little. Control yourself. Kalera nodded slowly. My body produces energy. Scent. Heat. It's strong. Some species go mad around it. Some don't feel anything. I don't know what it will do to you. Damon opened his mouth to reply, but a ping sound came from the wall console. He turned to look. It was a warning message. Alert. You are currently sealed inside Pod 6B with a female Zelari in active estrus cycle. Avoid all physical contact. Duration. 72 hours. He read it again, slowly, hoping it was a joke. But it wasn't. Damon turned back around. Kalira was still there. Still glowing. Still watching. "I will try to keep my distance," she said, "but you must not touch me." Damon swallowed hard. Yeah, definitely not. Silence filled the room again. A heavy, warm, awkward silence. Damon took a step back, then another. But Kalira suddenly spoke, her voice soft and strange. "Why are you trembling, human?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep inside, he didn't know if he was trembling from fear or from something else entirely. "I don't know if I should be scared or flattered." Damon didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he could feel her eyes on him. Kalira didn't move much, but her presence was impossible to ignore. The soft hum of her breathing, the glow of her skin, and the strange scent in the air, it all made the small pod feel tighter than ever. He lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. The warning message replayed in his mind. Avoid all physical contact. Easier said than done. The pod wasn't designed for two people, especially not during something like this. In the early morning hours, Damon finally gave up trying to sleep. He got up, walked quietly to the storage unit, and pulled out a thermal blanket, a few tools, and some rope. If he couldn't leave, he would at least make some kind of barrier, some space. Kalira watched him with half-lidded eyes. She hadn't slept either. "You're building a wall?" she asked softly. Damon nodded, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah, nothing personal. I just need boundaries." Her lips curved into a slow, curious smile. "Human males are strange." "I'll take that as a compliment," he muttered. He worked quickly, tying the blanket between two wall books and using a metal rod from the closet to support it like a curtain. It wasn't perfect, but it gave him a little privacy. "I'm not trying to offend you," he said as he finished. "I just don't know how this works. I've never lived with an alien during this." Kalira tilted her head. "Neither have I." That answer didn't help. The next few hours passed slowly. Damon stayed on his side of the curtain, working on his datapad, trying to distract himself with code diagnostics. But even through the fabric wall, he could hear her breathing change. It was deeper, slower, but sometimes it would speed up for no reason. He tried to focus, but his hands kept shaking. He hadn't eaten since yesterday. Eventually, hunger won. He stepped out to make some instant meal packs. The moment he passed the curtain, he saw her. Kalira was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Her skin was brighter now, shimmering with soft pink and blue hues. Her golden eyes met his instantly. "Are you okay?" he asked, trying to sound normal. "I'm fine," she said. "But you're not." "What do you mean?" She stood slowly. Her movements were smooth, almost too graceful. She stepped closer, just one step. "You're sweating," she said. "Your pulse is faster. You're breathing harder. My scent is affecting you." Damon backed away. "Okay, that's enough. Please, stay on your side." Kalira didn't argue. She simply turned and sat back down, but her voice followed him. "Your species is stronger than I thought." He didn't know how to respond to that. Later that evening, as the lights dimmed for station night mode, Damon sat near the small screen, reading through alien biology notes. He wanted to understand. He needed answers, but most of the files about Xelari females were locked under restricted access. Frustrated, he opened Kalira's translator tablet, which she had left on her bed. Just one file was marked Seasonal Protocol, Emergency. It was protected, but not strongly. Damon hacked it in minutes. He regretted it instantly. The file had logs, medical notes, emotional warnings. Xelari females in active estrus may suffer from hallucinations, emotional instability, and uncontainable urges. Contact during this time can result in permanent imprinting on the first being who engages physically. Permanent. Damon's heart pounded. He looked over the curtain toward her side. She was silent, but awake. He could feel it. Then the curtain moved. Not much. Just a small tug. Then again. And again. "Kalira," he said cautiously. A soft voice replied, "I'm sorry." Suddenly, the curtain ripped down in one smooth pull. Damon stumbled back in shock. Kalira stood there, eyes glowing bright, breathing hard. "I tried to control it," she said, "but the walls don't help. The scent bounces back. The heat builds." Damon raised his hands. "Wait. Stop. Please." Kalira didn't step forward, but she didn't step back either. "I won't hurt you," she said. "I won't touch you." He looked into her eyes. She looked desperate. "I don't understand," he said softly. "Why me? Why is this happening?" Kalira closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "Because you're kind. You speak softly. You didn't look at me like I was dangerous. Even now, you're afraid, but not cruel. That matters." He didn't know what to say. "I know I look strange to you," she added. "My people, we call it the calling. When it begins, we are drawn to whoever sees us as real." Damon sat down slowly. "So this isn't just about biology." Kalira shook her head. "No, it's also emotional, mental, spiritual. That's why it's dangerous." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Damon asked, "What happens if we make it through all 72 hours without contact?" She smiled, but it was sad. "Then the season passes, my body resets, but the connection fades. The bond dies before it's born." "And if contact happens?" Kalira didn't blink. "Then I belong to you." He swallowed hard. "Belong? That's a heavy word." She nodded. "For humans, maybe. But for us, it means loyalty. Devotion. Forever." Damon stood up and walked to the far wall. He didn't know what to feel. Fear, confusion, pressure. Behind him, Kalira whispered, "I'll stay on my side tonight. I promise." He turned just enough to glance at her. "I'm sorry this happened," she said. "I never wanted you to be trapped with me. But now, part of me is glad it was you." The lights dimmed fully, leaving only her soft glow in the dark. Damon laid back on his bed, his heart heavy with questions. This was no ordinary lockdown. This was a test neither of them had prepared for. And the worst part, he didn't know if he wanted to pass or fail. "I made a mistake. I touched her." The third day began with silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, tight silence that presses on your chest. Damon hadn't slept more than a few hours. He was exhausted, tired of thinking, tired of pretending he wasn't affected. He stood at the corner sink, splashing cold water on his face. It didn't help. Behind him, Kalira sat near the wall, her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't said much since the curtain came down last night. Her glow had dimmed a little, but her breathing still came in slow waves, as if she was trying hard to keep something locked deep inside. Damon turned to speak. "Do you want food?" She didn't answer at first. Then softly, "No, it's hard to eat when my body burns." He hesitated, then reached into the ration drawer. "You need to stay hydrated, at least." Kalira nodded. "I know." He walked toward her slowly, holding out a water pouch. That was the mistake. She reached to take it, but her fingers brushed his by accident. Just a touch. 1 second. But it was enough. Damon froze. Kalira gasped. A warm shock shot up his arm. Not pain. Something else. A wave of heat and emotion crashed into him. He felt her feelings. Not just now, but memories. Echoes. Fragments. Loneliness. Pain. Hope. Hunger. Desire. Fear. Him. Damon stumbled backward, dropping the pouch. Kalira sat still, her hands clenched, eyes glowing like fire. "No," she whispered. "No, I didn't mean to." What was that? Damon breathed. I warned you, she said, her voice shaking. I told you. No touch. I didn't do it on purpose. Damon shouted, stepping away. You reached for it. Kalira stood up suddenly, eyes wide, chest rising fast. It's too late now. The bond started. I can feel it. No. Stop. That's not fair. Kalira turned away, pressing both hands to the wall. I didn't want this either. I wanted to stay in control. I was doing everything I could to stop it. But now, the air around them shifted. It grew warmer. The scent in the pod thickened, like sweet smoke in a small room. Damon's head felt light. His vision blurred. Why do I feel like this? He asked, steadying himself. Kalira looked over her shoulder, her eyes softer now, almost sad. Because now part of me is inside you. His knees gave out, and he sat heavily on the bench. This isn't happening. Kalira walked toward him slowly. I won't force anything. I swear. I just need to explain. He didn't stop her. He was too dizzy to move. Kalira sat across from him, knees touching his. She didn't reach out again, but her voice dropped to a whisper. The Zelari are born alone. We bond only once in life, not by choice, but by instinct. And once that bond starts, it cannot stop. What happens now? Damon asked, eyes still locked on hers. Your scent is changing. Your energy is pulling toward mine. The bond will grow stronger over the next few hours. It will reach its peak by nightfall. And then my body will ask for completion, for connection. And if it doesn't happen, she trailed off. What? Damon asked. Kalira didn't answer. What happens to you, Kalira? She looked away. I will burn from the inside out. His heart dropped. No, he said firmly. There has to be another way. Medicine. Cooling therapy. Something. Kalira smiled, but it was weak. You think I haven't tried all those before. You think I want to risk dying because of some ancient biology. Her voice cracked. But this is my life. This is what my people call the fire trial. Some don't survive. And most don't get lucky enough to bond with someone gentle. Damon stood up, angry at everything. The station, the system, the closed doors. You're saying if I don't, you'll die. Kalira stood too. I'm saying I don't want you to feel forced, but I also can't lie anymore. My body is breaking down. My mind is slipping. And you're the only one who ever made me feel safe. Damon didn't know what to do. He looked at the locked pod door. Sealed. No help coming. Then he looked at her. Not as an alien, not as a stranger, but as someone trembling on the edge of life and death. His voice was quiet. Why me, Kalira? Why did your body choose me? Her answer was immediate. Because you listened. Because you never stared like I was some object. Because when you built that wall between us, it wasn't out of hate. It was out of respect. She took a step closer. And because, even now, you're scared, but you haven't run. Damon reached for her hand slowly this time. He touched her on purpose. No shock this time. Just warmth. Just calm. Kalira closed her eyes and sighed deeply. You're accepting it? She asked. I'm accepting that you're not just some alien roommate, he said. You're someone who matters. And I won't let you burn. The pod lights flickered. The console beeped. A message popped up. Warning. Bond completion in progress. Biological fusion phase initiating. Damon blinked. Wait. Biological what? Kalira's cheeks turned a deeper shade of pink. I forgot to mention. There's a side effect. Damon sighed. Of course there is. And then everything around them began to glow. We are not alone anymore. The glow around them faded slowly. Damon sat back, his heart still racing. Kalira was breathing calmly now, her skin glowing gently, not burning. The bond had reached its next stage, but he could still feel her emotions, peaceful and afraid. She whispered, "You slowed the fire, but it's not over yet." Damon nodded. "I know, but I won't let you go through it alone." They both turned toward the door as a sudden clang echoed through the pod. A low rumble followed. The console flashed red. New entry override detected. Incoming security override access. "What is that?" Damon asked, stepping in front of Kalira. Her body tensed. Her glow dimmed. "They're coming." "Who?" "The council. Or worse, my father's guard." The pod door hissed. A figure stepped inside. Tall, armored, silver skin and black eyes. Zealary, but male. Strong, proud, cold. "Kalira," he said, his voice deep and sharp. "You were not supposed to bond." Kalira backed up. "Varric, you shouldn't be here." Varric stepped forward. "Your father sent me." He sensed the shift. He knew the fire had begun. "I was chosen to claim you." Damon stepped between them. "She's already bonded." Varric looked him up and down, unimpressed. "The human." "You?" "He saved me," Kalira said firmly. "He kept me calm. He showed respect. He didn't treat me like I was just a body." Varric growled low. "That doesn't matter. The law is older than your feelings. You are royal blood, and royal fire must be claimed by a blooded male." Kalira lifted her chin. "You mean a warrior like you who only wants me because of power?" Varric ignored her and turned to Damon. "You touched her. That started the imprint. But the bond isn't complete until the trial is sealed. You still have time to step away." "I'm not stepping away," Damon said, voice steady. Varric's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight." Damon blinked. "Wait. What?" Kalira gasped. "No, he's human. He doesn't even know our ways." "That's not my concern," Varric said. "He accepted the bond. Now he must prove he is worthy." Damon looked at Kalira. "What does that mean?" She looked pale. "It's a challenge of worth. Not always to the death, but not far from it." Damon stared at Varric, who was already removing his armor. "Oh, great," Damon muttered. "I fix space engines. I don't fight space gladiators." Kalira stepped close and whispered, "Use your mind, not strength. That's your power. Zealary fights test instinct, not just muscle." Varric stood ready. "Step into the circle, human." Damon looked down and saw a glowing ring appear on the floor, projected by the pod's defense system. He sighed and stepped in. "Fine, let's do this." The trial began. Varric lunged, fast and brutal. Damon dodged just in time, rolling under his arm and scrambling to the other side of the ring. "You're slow," Varric sneered. "I'm just not stupid," Damon shot back, grabbing a metal bar from the wall. The fight wasn't fair. But Damon remembered what Kalira said, "Use instinct." When Varric came in again, Damon didn't attack. He dodged and tricked. He distracted him. Threw tools, moved silently, used the pod's layout against him. Each time, Varric grew more angry and more sloppy. Finally, Damon pulled the emergency seal lever. The pod dropped its gravity by 30% for safety mode. Damon, used to 0G, moved light and fast. Varric stumbled. In a blink, Damon knocked Varric backward and hit the lock ring switch on the floor. A clear barrier rose up, trapping Varric outside the circle. Damon stood alone in the center. The console lit up. Trial completed. Winner, human. Kalira ran to him, eyes wide with shock and joy. "You did it," she whispered. "You used your mind. You beat him." Varric growled from behind the barrier. "This isn't over." Kalira turned. "Yes, it is. He won the bond. I choose him." Varric vanished through the door, but not before saying, "The High Council will hear of this." Silence returned. The glow faded. Kalira collapsed into Damon's arms, trembling. "You don't know what this means," she said. "You just challenged a bloodhair of the Zelari. The others, they won't stay silent." "I don't care," Damon replied. "Let them come. I'm not giving you up." Kalira looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. "They won't just come for me anymore. Now they'll come for you, and for the bond we made." Damon tightened his arms around her. "Then let them come. Her body burns like fire, and I can't escape it." Hours passed after the trial, but Damon felt no peace. He sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, his mind spinning. Kalira was lying on the other side of the pod, curled up, her breathing uneven. Her skin pulsed with a deep red glow now. Not the soft colors from before. This was something different. Darker, hotter, dangerous. She was getting worse. He walked to the food unit and got another water pouch. It was warm. Everything in the pod was warmer now. The system couldn't cool the room fast enough. Damon's clothes stuck to his skin, and he could feel his heart beating faster. He returned to Kalira and knelt beside her. "You have to drink." She opened her eyes. They were barely golden anymore. They flickered like candlelight in a storm. "I can't," she whispered. "It won't help now." "You need to stay strong," Damon said. "We'll figure something out." Kalira smiled weakly. "No, you already did enough. You won the challenge. You gave me time. But the fire is in its final stage. If the bond isn't sealed soon, my body will shut down." Damon clenched his fists. "Then tell me what I need to do." Kalira shook her head. "It's not about doing. It's about accepting. If you truly choose me, not out of pity, not out of pressure, but willingly, the bond completes itself. My body will stop burning. My mind will return. I'll survive." He stared at her, heart pounding. "You think I don't choose you?" She looked at him, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Maybe part of you feels trapped. Maybe you wish you were locked in with someone else. Maybe you're only here because the door never opened." Damon stood up, walked away, then turned sharply. "Kalira, do you know how terrified I was when this all started? You stared at me like I was prey. You glowed in the dark. You told me not to touch you, or I'd change your life." She laughed softly. "Sounds like a great first impression." He smiled, but only for a second. "And still," he said, "I stayed. Not because I had to, but because I saw something in you. Behind the glow, behind the heat, behind the warnings, I saw someone who was just trying to survive." She didn't speak. "I don't want another door to open," he added, "because if I leave now, I'll never forgive myself." She sat up, her body shaking. "Then seal the bond. Make it real. Or walk away before it's too late." Damon stepped forward and knelt in front of her. "Kalira," he said softly, "I choose you. Fire, fear, madness, all of it. I don't care what the council says. I don't care what happens next. I'm not leaving." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm not strong enough to stop myself anymore," she whispered. "Then don't." He reached for her hand, slowly, like he was touching a flame. Their skin met. Kalira gasped, but not in pain. Her whole body trembled. A wave of light pulsed through the room, stronger than before. The pod systems beeped wildly. Damon held on tighter. Suddenly, her back arched, and she cried out. A sound filled with release and relief. Her skin burst into radiant gold. Her chest rose and fell, her heart racing like thunder. Damon didn't let go. He pressed his forehead to hers. Then something happened he didn't expect. He felt her inside his mind. Not just emotions now. Memories. Flashes. Visions. He saw her childhood on a cold planet, alone in royal chambers, watched by guards. He felt her pain when no one touched her. He heard her crying in a language he didn't understand, but felt deeply. And then, he saw himself, through her eyes, a moment from their first day. He stood near the console, awkward, nervous. And she thought, "Please don't look at me like I'm a monster." Back in the present, Damon whispered, "I never did." Kalira collapsed into his arms, the glow fading into a soft warmth. Her skin cooled, her breath steadied. It was over. The fire was gone. The bond was complete. But the console had one more message. Vital signs stabilized. Xelari female. Healthy. Bond status. Permanent. Secondary fusion detected. Life form development. Begun. Damon read it twice. Life form. Kalira slowly opened her eyes. "I was going to tell you. After the bond, if it's successful, the body begins to create new life. It's fast. Our biology is different." Damon blinked. "You mean?" "Yes," she said softly. "You're going to be a father." He sat down hard. "Okay. That's a lot." Kalira reached out and held his hand. "I can undo it," she whispered. "There's a small window. I can reverse the cycle. You don't have to stay." Damon looked at her and smiled. "You think I'm going anywhere now?" Kalira laughed, and for the first time, it wasn't filled with fear or pain. It was light, free. They sat together, side by side, as the pod lights returned to normal. But just as peace settled in, the console blinked again. Incoming transmission. Xelari High Council. Demand immediate surrender of bonded pair. Damon sighed. Guess they're not sending a baby shower gift. Kalira stood tall, her hand in his. "No," she said. "They're sending a war. One kiss could save her life. But what does that make me?" The transmission repeated over and over. Xelari High Council. You are ordered to surrender the bonded female and terminate the unauthorized imprint. Failure to comply will result in forceful extraction. Damon sat in silence, his eyes on the blinking screen. His hand was still wrapped around Kalira's. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. But he could feel it. Her fear. She was trying to stay strong for him. Damon looked at her. "We can run, right? Hide somewhere in the station." Kalira shook her head slowly. "No, not now. They've marked us. They'll track my heat signature anywhere. So what do we do?" She stood, her face calm but serious. "We make a choice." The pod lights dimmed, and the air grew colder. Damon knew what was coming. He opened the console and accessed the external camera. 3 Xelari vessels hovered outside the space station, small but military class, fast, armed, and ruthless. "They came fast," Damon muttered. "They knew," Kalira whispered. "My father has wanted to control my bond for years. He thought I would give myself willingly to a warrior of his choosing, someone to strengthen his political power." She turned toward Damon. "But I gave myself to you." He walked to her and touched her cheek. "You didn't give yourself. We found each other. That's different." Kalira looked down. "They won't accept that." The transmission switched. A new voice came through. Older, colder. "This is High Chancellor Vekros of the Xelari Council. The bond is illegal. The union is rejected. Release the female now and step away. This is your final warning. Human." Damon stepped in front of the screen. "Listen to me," he said. "She didn't break any law. She didn't ask for the fire to start. You locked her away in silence her whole life. All I did was treat her like a person." Silence. Then the voice replied, "You treated her like a mate. That is forbidden." Suddenly, Kalira cried out. Damon rushed to her. Her body was burning again. "No, no, no, no," he said, lowering her to the floor. "What's happening?" he asked. Kalira gasped. "They triggered a failsafe, a genetic override. The council built it into my bloodline. If I bond with a non-Xelari, my body resets, breaks down." "You mean they're trying to kill you?" She nodded weakly. "Unless the imprint is sealed fully, with a ceremonial mark, it can only be given by you. One final kiss, full acceptance, but once you give it, you become one of us. Forever. Damon froze. One kiss can save your life, he whispered. Kalira coughed, her body trembling. But it will change yours forever. You'll be marked. Not human. Not Xelari. Something in between. No going back. Damon sat beside her, his heart heavy. His life flashed before his eyes. Earth, family, his job, his dreams. But then he looked at her. The girl who burned alone, who found peace only in his presence, who chose him, even when her own kind saw him as nothing. Damon leaned forward. His voice shook. I don't care what I become. I only care if you're alive when this ends. Kalira's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. He kissed her. Not soft. Not rushed. A full imprint kiss. Her skin glowed again. Gold, then white, then silver. The room burst with heat and light. Their bond flared, locked, and sealed. Symbols appeared on Damon's arm. Bright, ancient marks that faded into his skin. The fire stopped. Kalira lay still, but smiling. I'm alive, she whispered. You saved me. The console screamed. Unauthorized imprint confirmed. Genetic fusion, irreversible. Damon Kane, marked Xelari hybrid. Council declaration. Class 5 threat. Damon stood slowly. Guess I just made their list. But Kalira smiled proudly. You made history. Moments later, the pod shook violently. The Council's ships were forcing a docking. Kalira sat up, stronger now. They're coming. Damon checked the console. Then we make them regret it. He opened the storage wall and pulled out the emergency shields and pulse emitters. Nothing fancy, but enough to cause chaos. Kalira joined him. Are you really ready for this? No, Damon admitted, but I'm ready for you. The door hissed open. 10 armored Xelari warriors marched in. Kalira stepped forward, not scared, not burning, glowing. The commander spoke. Stand down. The bond is rejected. Your punishment is exile or death. Kalira raised her hand, and her new marks glowed. No, she said firmly. I carry a new life. I carry a new bloodline, and I carry a partner who chose love over fear. That bond is stronger than your loss. Damon added, and if you want to take her, you'll have to go through me. The warriors paused. One of them lowered their weapon, then another. The youngest among them stepped forward and removed their helmet. I have never seen a bond burn that bright, she said. It is real. And we were taught to follow truth. The commander hesitated, then slowly stepped back. We will report this to the council, he growled. Kalira nodded. Do that, and tell them the old ways are dying. The warriors left without blood. Kalira turned to Damon, heart racing. You changed everything, she said. No, he said softly. We did. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The next morning was silent. Not heavy, not tense, just peaceful. Damon woke slowly, wrapped in warmth. For the first time in days, the pod felt calm. Kalira was resting beside him, her breathing soft, her skin glowing gently. The mark on his arm still tingled, a reminder that everything had changed. He sat up quietly and looked around. No alarms, no threats, just stillness. But peace never lasts on the edge of war. The console blinked. Incoming council message, final ruling delivered. Damon took a deep breath and tapped it. A hologram appeared, showing Chancellor Vecros again, his eyes colder than ever. The council has voted. You are to be exiled from all Xelari systems. The bond shall not be recognized. The child shall not be granted a name. Return to Earth, or suffer arrest if found within any space we govern. Kalira stood beside Damon, now fully awake. This was expected, she said. Damon read the rest of the message. You have 24 hours to leave the station. After that, enforcement units will engage. He turned to Kalira. So they're letting us go, but making sure we can never come back. Kalira nodded. Yes. It's not mercy. It's fear. They can't kill us. Not without backlash. So they erase us. Damon frowned. Then we'll write our own story. Later that day, Kalira stood by the small mirror, staring at her reflection. Her body was no longer glowing wildly. But something new had taken its place, a softness in her eyes, a fullness in her face. The child was growing. Fast. Xelari pregnancies happened in cycles, and once the bond was sealed, life began immediately. Damon had accepted it, but still, seeing it unfold felt unreal. He stood behind her and placed his hand gently on her side. "Does it feel strange?" he asked. Kalira smiled. "No, it feels right. Like my body always knew it was waiting for this." He nodded. "And your heart?" She turned to him. "My heart was waiting for you." They both smiled, but it didn't last long. The station AI pinged again. Transport vessel approaching. Earthbound class. Boarding in 1 hour. Damon blinked. They're really sending us back to Earth. Kalira's smile faded. "No, just you." "What?" She walked to the screen and pulled up a hidden message, one only she could access as a royal Xelari. Only the human is cleared for return. The Xelari female is forbidden to cross into Earth space without official recognition. If the human stays, he will be stripped of all Earth rights. He will be registered as a rogue species hybrid. Damon read it. Twice. Then stared at her. "So, they're trying to break us apart." Kalira's voice cracked. "If you go, you'll have your life. Your job. Your world. No war. No exile. No mark. And you." She looked away. "I stay here. In the ungoverned zones. Alone. With our child." Damon didn't move. His mind raced. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But it was real. Kalira placed her hands on his chest. "You don't have to decide now. But if you leave, do it with love. Don't look back." He stared into her eyes. "Kalira," he said softly, "when I came to space, I was running. From everything. Life, people, expectations. I just wanted quiet. And you got me instead," she smiled. Damon nodded. "Loud, glowing, stubborn, terrifying you." They both laughed, then fell quiet. "I have a choice," he said finally. "Earth or exile. Career or chaos. Comfort or you." Kalira's eyes welled with tears. "Choose peace, Damon. Please." He leaned forward, placed his forehead against hers, and whispered, "I choose home. And home is wherever you are." 1 hour later, the Earthbound transport docked. The doors opened. Kalira stood near the ramp, holding Damon's old jacket. The officer looked at Damon. "Passenger Damon Kane. You boarding." Damon looked at Kalira, then down at his arm, the mark glowing faintly beneath the skin. Then at the child growing inside her. He turned to the officer. "No. Excuse me." Damon smiled. "Find someone else to pilot your broken satellites. I've got a future to build." The officer frowned. "You'll be exiled from Earth for this." Damon took Kalira's hand. "Then Earth never deserved me." The doors closed. The ship left without him. Months passed. On a small moon, hidden in the free zones, Damon and Kalira built a home. Not fancy. Not quiet. But full of light. Their child was born glowing and loud, just like her mother. She had Damon's smile, Kalira's eyes, and something new entirely in her. A future. The story spread through the zones. A human and a Xelari. A love that defied rules. A child born of peace. And when the old ways finally crumbled, their names were written first in the new history books. Kalira would often joke, It wasn't supposed to end like this. And Damon would reply, no, it was supposed to be better.